Welcome to another deep dive. And today we're going to be looking into the world of Bob Camblin. And you've provided us with quite a collection of his writings and quotes and also biographical information, reviews about his books. Really, it's a wonderful collection of material to dig into to try to get a feel for what this artist was all about.
Yeah, we've got a lot to work with here. So we've got these sort of philosophical glimpses through his quotes, and then we're able to piece together a little bit about his life and his artistic journey, and then also how critics and other artists responded to his vision. And what's interesting too is, some of these writings are very personal. They were never intended for the public, so it's kind of a real inside look.
Yeah, it is. And so what we'd like to do today for you is to instead of just listing a bunch of stuff off, we'd like to sort of connect the dots and to try to uncover the major themes that keep popping up, the major recurring motifs, if you will, and also to look at how his artistic philosophy might have evolved over time. So we're going to try to bring together all these different sources and provide you with a richer understanding of this guy who sounds like he was quite a character. Where do you think is a good place to start?
I think jumping into the quotes is a great way to start because we can sort of get a glimpse of his core beliefs. Like this one, for instance, in the balance, patience, and yet freedom again, and yet in silence. I mean, it's almost like he's holding opposite forces together.
Hmm.
It makes you wonder if this idea of balance wasn't really kind of a fundamental principle for him.
Yeah. It's like he's saying these two things that are in tension can actually coexist. And the inclusion of silence is interesting as well. You have to have that space to sort of reflect on all of this dynamism. And then he follows that with this thought about common sense and the perfectly average existing alongside an openness to miracles in science and magic, and hopes that they might meet in a bright, quote, gray future. It's such a strange sort of blend of the practical with the completely fantastical. What do you think that tells us about his worldview?
It tells me he doesn't like to be put into a box, that he sees the potential for wonder in the everyday and the impossible. He doesn't seem to dismiss anything out of hand. And this bright gray future he's talking about, it hints at a synthesis, a world where the rational and the miraculous aren't mutually exclusive, which suggests a mind that was both grounded and wildly imaginative, which I think is kind of necessary for an artist. And this openness to the less tangible is even further emphasized by his concept of the sixth sense, which he declares senza dubio, without a doubt.
Without a doubt. He's certain about this. That's an amazing thing, to just, I mean, we talk about our five senses, but this idea of intuition or just some other sense, that is beyond what we normally think of. And he's just certain about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder about the role of gut feelings and creativity, right? Because sometimes artists operate in a level that goes beyond just, logic. And then we have this recurring motif of nature and surrender, Find something in nature that completes you and then surrender. So simple. And yet, it's this idea of connecting with nature, with the natural world, and surrendering to it, almost as if nature holds the key to our own self-understanding. Why do you think he comes back to that so often?
Well, I think for many artists, nature is both the source of inspiration, but also a metaphor for larger universal principles, growth and decay and interconnectedness. And his call to surrender suggests this kind of letting go of the ego, a willingness to be part of something bigger. And it's interesting how this idea of surrendering to nature might connect with his views on art evolving from art for art's sake to art for life's sake, or art for my sake, or even art for survival's sake.
Wow.
So it's almost like art becomes less about a detached ideal and more about this fundamental human need, entwined with our existence.
Yeah. Yeah. It's no longer about just creating something beautiful to look at, but something that has a much deeper resonance, a much deeper meaning, and perhaps even a vital function. And then we encounter this interesting idea of stepping off the train of thought to find power. Very Zen-like, this idea that our constant thinking can obscure deeper truths or insights.
Yeah, absolutely. In many Eastern philosophies, quieting the mind is seen as a pathway to wisdom. And stepping off the train of thought, he might be suggesting that we can access a more intuitive, less cluttered form of understanding, and kind of a power that lies, beyond our analytical minds. And this aligns with his observation that when you think, don't act. When you act, don't think. So it really highlights the potential pitfalls of over-intellectualizing experience and suggests that there's value in kind of a more direct embodied engagement with the world.
So we need to get out of our heads and just be in the moment. Don't overthink everything. And you see this deep connection to the cosmos and nature in these really wonderful sensory details, like the cosmos waves at me with tree leaves. Oh, what a beautiful image of interconnectedness! Like he's in direct communication with the universe through the natural world. What does that tell you about his relationship with his surroundings?
It tells me he felt a profound sense of belonging, that he wasn't just an observer, but an active participant. The cosmos isn't this distant and cold thing. It's waving at him through the leaves.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the sensory richness, I think, is really crucial to understanding, his perspective. He's experiencing the world, very viscerally, and that undoubtedly informed, his artistic vision. And this carries over to his more abstract reflections, like this one, Act 1, the White Mountains. Act 2, the cold wind. Act 3, the lightning. We leave before the show is over. And it's so concise. It's almost like a haiku. What do you make of this?
Yeah. The leaving before the show is over is very interesting to me. I mean, it could be a commentary on the fleeting nature of experience, right? The things are constantly changing and we rarely get to see anything through to its conclusion, or maybe it's even about the power of the incomplete, right? Leaving something to the imagination. And then he shifts his focus to communication and conflict. If you argue or if you agree, you may learn, but you do not communicate. Wow. That's a very insightful point about the limitations of purely intellectual exchange. What's he getting at there?
I think he's suggesting that true communication goes beyond just exchanging information, or winning a debate. It requires a deeper level of understanding, empathy, a willingness to see things from another's perspective. Arguments and even agreements can be based on this sort of surface level understanding, whereas communication, implies a much more profound connection. And this kind of ties into his concept of the quarry and the need to see all around all at once. So it's about having this holistic awareness, not just focusing on, a single target or viewpoint.
It's the big picture again. He wants us to broaden our and he also talks about revolution versus evolution, and he seems to think that revolution might be based on a misunderstanding, while true change for him starts within the mind of an individual and then maybe it ripples outward from there. It's a very considered perspective on how progress happens. Do you think that's right?
It suggests he believes in this kind of this more organic internal process of change. That revolution might be too reactive, too rooted in this kind of immediate conflict rather than these fundamental shifts in understanding. Evolution, on the other hand, it implies this deeper, more gradual transformation that begins with individual consciousness. And you can certainly see the influence of haiku in a lot of his observations, even when they're not structured in the traditional haiku, 3 lines. Yeah. 5, 7, 5. He has this amazing ability to distill a complex idea into just a few really potent words.
Yeah, he does. And then let's not overlook the humor, that wonderful, slightly off-kilter way of looking at the world.
Yeah.
Like he says to Mother Nature, well, it's enough about me, Mother Nature. Let's talk about you. It's so unexpected. It humanizes him. It shows that, that he doesn't take himself too seriously. How does that humor affect the way we understand his more serious ideas?
It prevents it from becoming too heavy. It makes him relatable. He's poking fun at himself. It's a gentle way of inviting us into his world and making these insights more accessible. He also delves into this distinction between belief and knowing, referencing mystics. These figures who have had this direct experience. That transcends logical explanation, emphasizing the need for both intuition and reason.
So he sees different pathways to truth. It's not just one size fits all, if you will.
Yeah.
You can come to the truth in a variety of different ways. And this idea that history is believable when it is creative is an interesting one. It makes you question sort of the narratives that we accept about the past. What's the implication there?
He seems to be highlighting the fact that our understanding of history is always shaped by interpretation.
Right.
It's not just a collection of objective facts, but it's a narrative constructed by human minds. So there's always going to be, this element of creativity involved. And he connects this to our own inherent creativity. That we are all creative, but we lose our magic in understanding everything instead of knowing.
So it's back to that knowing.
Back to knowing.
Yeah.
It's like overanalyzing stifles our innate creative spark.
It's like the difference between looking at a butterfly and dissecting a butterfly. And And then he talks about his paradoxical approach to art itself: draw, teach, search, reveal, always framed in paradox. So it's almost as if the very process of creating and understanding art is full of these inherent contradictions. Why frame it in paradox?
Because it rarely is a linear or logical process. It often involves embracing uncertainty, exploring seemingly opposite ideas. You arrive at these unexpected conclusions. The paradoxes reflect the inherent mysteries and complexities of art itself. And he also offers this critique of the art world, including history, critics, and this affluent culture, and advocating for a naive approach to art and identification as the aesthetic. So it's a call for a more direct, less mediated experience of art, untainted by preconceived notions or the opinions of others.
So don't go in with all these ideas in your head. Just go in and experience it for yourself. And this analogy of a critic as a legless man who teaches running.
Wow.
It's just perfect. I mean, what does that tell us about his view of art criticism?
That those who critique art may not always have the direct experience of creating it. Right? There's this potential disconnect between theoretical understanding and the actual practice. He also emphasizes the nonverbal aspects of both drawing and concept, suggesting that art communicates on this level that transcends words. And this leads to this idea of finding your own mystic switch, this personal key to unlocking truth and insight.
Yeah, it sounds like it's something that is that's very individual, right? Your own mystic switch. You have to find it for yourself. It's not something that somebody else can give you. You have to discover that for yourself. And he also talks about failure being a crucial part of success and the importance of process and awareness, which I think is really encouraging for anyone who's engaged in any creative endeavor. Why is it that he seems to put so much emphasis on failure?
Because failure is often where the most significant learning and growth occurs. It's through our mistakes, that we identify what doesn't work and we discover these new possibilities. And by embracing failure, it frees us to experiment, to take risks. And this connects with his idea of recreation in art, suggesting this continuous cycle of renewal and reimagining. He even brings in this concept of the Seizen mind in relation to creativity and intuition, highlighting the power of a focused yet empty state of mind.
It's almost like getting out of your own way.
Right.
And just letting the ideas flow without judgment. And this idea of resist learning. Learn to fail, learn to relax, learn to feel, learn how to really think. Almost like a little mini manifesto for a different kind of education, right?
Yeah.
One that prioritizes experience and genuine inquiry over, rote memorization or just following the rules.
Yeah.
It's a pretty powerful challenge to traditional educational models.
It is. He's advocating for this more holistic and experiential approach to learning. He also offers this fascinating perspective on mirrors, seeing them not just as reflections, but as a metaphor for everyone being a mirror to one another, which he calls magic.
The magic of mirroring. What is that?
It speaks to the interconnectedness of human experience, the idea that we reflect aspects of ourselves back to each other, whether consciously or unconsciously. And it's a powerful image of how we learn and understand ourselves through interactions with others. And he distinguishes between magic for power, which is negative, and magic for seeing, which is positive, suggesting that true insight is a form of positive magic.
So one is manipulative and the other is genuine. And then he says that this real seeing creates a whirlpool of relationships, and that art is just partial retention of that complex interconnectedness. It's this idea that art can only capture a little fragment of this larger flowing reality. And he also talks about how aware he is of the disposable art culture, and the artist's dilemma of like technique versus just doing something novel. It sounds like he's grappling with some very contemporary issues even back then.
He is. This tension between artistic integrity and the pressures of the market is a timeless struggle for artists. He even uses yin and yang mandala, although he notes that it's been unfortunately popularized, which suggests this deeper, perhaps more personal understanding of these symbols, as representing this interconnectedness and wholeness. And he has this really strong belief that in explaining something, it is killed, which echoes his earlier point about the limitations of intellectualizing art.
Why is it that explanation would kill something?
Because the essence, the mystery, the direct experience can get lost in the process of analysis and verbalization. It's like trying to capture a scent, by describing its chemical components. The description might be accurate, but it doesn't convey the sensory experience. He also reflects on the passage of time and influences, hoping for diverse forms and intentions in his own work, suggesting this constant striving for innovation and authenticity. And then he introduces this image of the standard sign against the sunset, highlighting the limitations of transferred knowledge, that some truths can only be grasped through direct personal experience. It's a powerful reminder that some things can't be taught. They have
Yeah.
to be lived.
Yeah, that image of the sign against the sunset is really powerful. It's like it's just this one little thing against this vast, colorful backdrop. And then he also has this imagery of white crystals, white bones, which he uses to represent decay. It's a stark reminder, right, of impermanence. The inevitable cycle of life and death. But then he balances this with very practical advice on making the best of it, including these really encouraging words. There are no mistakes, and trust your instincts. It's very accepting and empowering.
It is. It suggests this fluidity and a trust in the creative process, where even perceived missteps can lead to these unexpected discoveries. He even playfully reverses the adage, "Pride goeth before a fall," suggesting various cause and effect relationships around pride and failure. It's almost like he's taking this common saying, and turning it over and over to find new meaning. And he uses this analogy of two bits of a hologram arguing to illustrate this lack of cooperation for the bigger picture, which leads to his concept of the hologram, the complete message. It's a compelling metaphor for how individual perspectives contribute to a larger understanding.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's a great image. He also talks about approaching an edge of real time and his views on the universe, whether it's finite or infinite. And he even talks about solipsists, and this idea that maybe they just misunderstand the nature of reality. And it shows this sort of like wide-ranging intellectual curiosity that goes, well beyond just art.
Absolutely. He's grappling with these fundamental words about existence and perception. He also considers our place in time, suggesting we live in the past, present, and future with the purpose here being to dream of how it works. So it's a beautifully poetic way to frame, our existence as this ongoing, exploration of the universe's mysteries.
And he has this idea of time travel at the speed of enlightenment, so that spiritual insight transcends temporal limitations.
Yeah.
And he contrasts the hawks and snakes approaches to life as metaphors for different human paths. One is more direct and action-oriented. The other is more subtle and observant. And it's like he's constantly looking for new lenses, to see the human condition.
Yeah, and he captures the cyclical nature of existence with the phrase, "the way back," long silence, melting rocks, infinite space, eternal time, a point of return, a cycle, a beginning, an ending, the next step in the next, an action required, a link to the past, a thread of the future. It's this whole journey in a single sentence.
Yeah, it's almost like an epic haiku. He also has this anecdote about Louis Sullivan and a broom closet, which he connects to the idea of honor, and that really seems to sort of highlight this deep respect for integrity and craftsmanship. He also has this idea that some crutches are wooden, some are gold, and this tension between futility and provocation, suggesting that our supports and motivations can be very complex and even deceptive.
Yeah, exactly. What appears to be a support might also be a limitation. He uses this metaphor of a phoenix frozen in a salty shell to describe, this inability to renew. So it's this powerful image of stagnation and being trapped. But then, later on, he reflects that the living was the meaning, even if the revealed meaning is an empty rib cage full of sand. and so that's a pretty profound shift in perspective, finding value in the act of existence itself, regardless of any grand ultimate revelation.
Yeah, it's very existential. He even talks about the universe folding back on itself in the distant future, showing this grand cosmic perspective and just constantly zooming in and out between the personal and the universal. And it's interesting how many of his ideas resonate with quotes that you've included from other thinkers, that it really does kind of place him in a rich tapestry of philosophical and artistic thought.
Yeah, absolutely. These connections to figures like Suzuki, Watts, James, Sartre, So many others highlight, this timeless and universal nature of many of his concerns. These recurring themes of interconnectedness, the importance of intuition, the acceptance of impermanence, and this exploration of the inner world. It echoes throughout his writings and the thoughts of these other significant thinkers.
Okay, so we've gotten a good understanding of his philosophical leanings through his own words. Let's turn our attention now to his biographical insights. He was born in Oklahoma in 1928, and in 1955 he received a Fulbright to Italy, which must have been a huge experience. And then he embarked on this teaching career. How did his life journey shape his artistic output? Well, that early exposure to European art and culture, particularly in Italy, undoubtedly broadened his artistic horizons and introduced him to a wider range of styles and ideas. His teaching career suggests this commitment to engaging with and sharing artistic principles. But the really significant turning point seems to have been his radical decision in 1976 to become a nomadic artist.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. To give up a stable teaching position, to embrace this kind of nomadic existence. What do you think motivated that, and how did that affect his work?
I think it speaks to this deep desire for freedom and this commitment to living his art fully. He funded his travels by selling his work. He drew direct inspiration from the diverse cultures and landscapes he encountered across Italy, France, Ireland, Mexico, and the South Pacific. And it's crucial to remember that the quotes and musings that we've been discussing come primarily from the period between 1950 and 1974, so before this nomadic phase, and were never intended for public consumption.
So it gives us this particularly unfiltered look at his thinking leading up to this major life change.
Yeah. And his artistic style also changed over time, going from abstract impressionism to the creation of these mouche volantes. Can you explain that transition and what mouche volantes were all about?
So initially, his work did lean towards this abstract expressionist movement. However, he then pioneered this technique called mouche volantes, which translates from French to flying flies.
Okay.
And these were artworks composed of dots and dashes that were designed to create these optical illusions for the viewer. So they mimicked those little, specks that you see sometimes floating in your field of vision. It was a way of actively engaging the viewer's perception and blurring the lines between what's actually on the canvas, and what the eye perceives.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly innovative and engaging, making the viewer an active participant in the art. He also collaborated with other artists, Earl Staley and Joe Tate, to form B&E Productions and the Holding Firm, which sounds like they're really sort of pushing the boundaries and challenging the norms. What was the nature of these collaborations?
Their collaborations were often these performance-based events and exhibitions that emphasized the creative process itself rather than just the finished artwork. So they challenged the traditional hierarchical structures of the art world and explored these ideas of collective creativity, which aligns with Camblin's later practice of often signing his works as anonymous or anonymous artists.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's this powerful gesture of humility
Yeah.
and a statement about the submergence of individual ego in favor of this kind of shared artistic expression.
Yeah. And that idea of the anonymous, that's really, that speaks volumes. And then he had these later series, Big Al and Descent from the Cross, which, showed his continued exploration of different themes and techniques. He died on December 3rd. And it's interesting, Earl Staley talks about, their friendship, that they shared studios, that they were really good friends. And he even refers to Camblin's studio as his wizard's den.
Uh-huh.
And it sounds like he was kind of this, Mr. Peanut figure in Houston, Texas.
Yeah.
And the fact that, his supporters had trouble trying to organize a posthumous show just kind of, adds to this sense of him being an enigmatic artist, right?
Yeah.
Whose work resists easy categorization.
It does. Staley's recollections offer this valuable personal glimpse, into Camblin's character and his dedication to his unique artistic path. And these challenges in organizing a posthumous exhibition likely reflect the sheer volume and the somewhat dispersed nature of his work over his long and varied career.
Okay. Now let's talk about one particular piece our man paints too. We have a YouTube video that discusses it and a description of it in this book called Zen and the Art of Enlightenment, Volume 2. Can you describe the painting for our listeners?
Imagine a close-up portrait of a man dressed in a suit and tie, filling much of the frame. And the background is this deep maroon or burgundy. And there's some subtle text, almost ghostly and blended imagery that suggests that there are layers beneath the surface. The man's expression is calm, maybe even inquisitive. The colors are warm, earthy tones applied with visible, textured brushstrokes. So it gives it kind of a tactile feel. And the composition is quite intimate, cutting off around his shoulders, drawing your focus directly to his face. And in the background, you can see these softer washes of reds and grays with these faint suggestions of other faces that are sort of hinting at a broader context or unseen relationships. And near the top, there's this partially obscured text, likely the title "Our Man Paints Too" or something similar.
So it sounds very intriguing and layered. What are some of the ways this painting has been interpreted, drawing from the video and the excerpt?
Well, one prominent interpretation centers on this duality suggested by the title itself, right? So it's not just a formal figure, it's not just a man in a suit, but he's also engaged in this act of creating
too.
Right. So this juxtaposition between this conventional appearance and this artistic activity is really key. And the faint background figures could represent a community or influences or even aspects of the man's own identity. The overall feeling is one of serenity combined with a subtle dynamism, which perhaps reflects this Zen concept of wu-wei, effortless action. The layered imagery also suggests interconnectedness, that no individual exists in isolation. And this infinity symbol that's subtly embedded within the two could be a commentary on the enduring nature of art or the infinite possibilities within human expression.
Yeah, that hidden infinity symbol is very interesting. It adds another whole level of meaning. Maybe commenting on the role of leadership or societal roles, within a larger context. Stylistically, what influences do you see?
You can definitely see echoes of post-impressionism and early expressionism in the way that the colors are layered, and the visible brushstrokes convey emotion. And while the subject matter has a realist foundation, the painterly quality recalls the work of 20th century portraitists like Lucian Freud, who also focused intensely on the human face and the texture of paint. And the subdued text and background elements also hint at a pop, or graphic sensibility, although much more understated.
Yeah, so there really is a synthesis of different artistic approaches, and then the forward from Zen in the Art Volume 1 also provides a broader lens through which to view Camblin's work, highlighting his fusion of abstraction with symbolic motifs, and this merging of ancient wisdom with modern experimentation, and his art acting as a portal to heightened awareness. How does Our Man Paints Too fit into this larger framework?
It embodies that fusion perfectly. The formal portraiture, could be seen as a recognizable entry point, a grounding in the modern, while the underlying layers and symbolic elements hint at this deeper, perhaps, ancient wisdom or archetypal themes. And the painting invites you to look beyond the surface to contemplate the duality and the interconnectedness. And in doing so, it acts as this portal to heightened awareness by prompting active thought and interpretation. And the foreword mentions his work, prompting active contemplation, almost like a spiritual practice, that encourages self-inquiry and the recognition of constant change. So viewing the painting becomes an active dialogue, a personal journey of discovery.
Yeah, it's that active engagement that seems to be such a recurring theme in understanding Camblin's